Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Right off the bat, we are looking at a classic, truly profound choice currently facing the United States. And honestly, this is a conceptual crossroads that goes way, way beyond your daily news cycle or those temporary partisan debates we always hear about. As we unpack the source material today, we aren't just looking at standard policy, we're actually looking at identity. We're examining the very soul of a nation and the structural paths it can choose to walk down. You know, every superpower in history has faced a moment where it must define what it fundamentally exists to do, and the choices made, well, they echo for centuries. The source we're analyzing today basically strips away all that political noise to present a foundational, almost philosophical dichotomy about where a society's resources, its energy, and its ultimate loyalties actually lie. So we're going to break down these complex dynamics into really clear fundamental concepts so we can all understand the true weight of this national decision.
Okay, let's dive into this. The core question presented by our source material is pretty stark. Empire or democracy? Now, I know it sounds like a simple choice, maybe even a rhetorical one, but the implications are massive. Our source impartially frames this as the ultimate fork in the road for the U.S. On one side, you've got a path leaning heavily toward operating as a global empire, prioritizing international influence and massive reach. On the flip side, you have a path grounded entirely in domestic democracy, prioritizing the immediate needs of the everyday citizens right within its own borders. We're going strictly by how the source defines these two distinct directions, looking right past the catchy campaign slogans to analyze the actual foundational mechanics of each system. What does it actually mean, practically and financially, for a modern nation to function as an empire versus functioning as a democracy?
To understand the choice, we first need to define the terms, right? So the source defines empire through a very specific equation, power plus control. In this model, power isn't something meant to be neatly contained within national borders. It's actively exported. The primary focus, and really the vast majority of the state's logistical energy, are directed outward. The source highlights that in this framework, just immense, mind-boggling amounts of capital flow into the military apparatus. We're talking bombs, fighter jets, sprawling naval fleets, and this huge network of global bases. And the so what here is that this is all designed to maintain a specific global order and project strength internationally. In an empire system, a nation's resources are heavily invested in ensuring stability, dominance, and economic leverage on the world stage. It's a system fundamentally built on external projection, where international control is viewed as the absolute ultimate guarantor of security.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the opposing concept. Democracy is defined here simply but incredibly powerfully as people first. In stark contrast to the outward projection and international policing of that empire model, the democracy model drastically turns the focus inward. The national budget, the legislative energy, the collective resources, they all remain heavily domestic. The source emphasizes that in this scenario, the whole priority matrix shifts entirely. Funding for healthcare systems, public education, fixing crumbling infrastructure, and just general public welfare are placed firmly above war, military expansion, or any foreign intervention. It's a model all about building up the citizenry from within. According to this definition, the true strength of the nation isn't measured by the footprint of its global military alliances or how much territory it influences. Not at all. It's measured by the health, stability, and well-being of its own people at home.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict between these two paths. We're looking at a stark, head-on collision of priorities: bombs versus hospitals. The source uses this exact comparison to highlight the intense tension of resource allocation that every single superpower inevitably faces. Because let's be real, a nation, no matter how wealthy, only has a finite amount of treasure, time, and human capital. The bomb side represents the empire model, a system demanding incredibly well-funded war capabilities, external projection, and continuous global control just to sustain itself. The hospital side represents the democracy model, focusing heavily on domestic needs, social safety nets, and public welfare. In this dynamic, the source points out that domestic infrastructure is very often left under-resourced when it's forced to compete directly with massive military spending. It perfectly captures the friction of a national budget stretched to its absolute limits. Where does the money actually go?
When bombs have money but hospitals lack it, it's a moral choice, not technical. This statement right here is really the philosophical heart of our source material's argument. You know, we are so often led to believe that national budgets are just complex technical spreadsheets, just huge math problems meant for economists and politicians to balance. But the argument presented here flips that notion entirely on its head. The source insists that this profound resource imbalance is actually, well, scratch that. It's not just an imbalance, it's a deep ethical dilemma. choosing to heavily fund the mechanisms of global power, while essential domestic infrastructure like healthcare struggles to even survive. That isn't merely a budgetary technicality or some innocent rounding error. It's a stark reflection of a society's ultimate values. It is a deliberate, moral choice about what and ultimately who matters most to the state when push comes to shove.
To really contextualize this ethical dilemma, the source zooms out to look at historical precedent, reminding us that we certainly aren't the first society to face this exact crossroads. Consider the Roman Empire. Consider the Soviet Union. These were massive, sprawling, almost unimaginably powerful global superpowers of their respective eras. I mean, they projected immense power, funded colossal militaries, and maintained incredibly strict control across distant borders. From the outside looking in, they seemed absolutely invincible. But the impartial historical observation made by the source here is absolutely critical to understand the argument. Ultimately, these massive global powers did not collapse because they were suddenly outmatched and conquered by external enemies on the battlefield. No. Their overwhelming, incredibly well-funded military might couldn't save them from the actual rot that brought their empires crashing down.
So the crucial point is, empire falls from inside. According to the source, the historical fall of superpowers like Rome and the Soviet Union is directly attributed to devastating internal imbalances. When a nation operates primarily as an empire, pouring the vast majority of its wealth, focus, and innovative energy outward just to maintain global control, it severely risks hollowing out its own domestic core. It's like a giant puzzle where you're taking pieces from the center to build out the edges. If the hospitals, the schools, the roads, the economy, the very foundational pillars of the citizenry are systematically neglected in favor of the bombs and the external projection of power, the entire societal structure eventually grows brittle. The foundation just cracks under the immense weight of the outward expansion. The collapse doesn't come from some foreign invader. It happens from within, right when the people can simply no longer support the empire.
Which brings us to the ultimate, completely unresolved question of this explainer. America chooses what? Based on the heavy historical precedents and the incredibly stark definitions we've explored today, what will the future hold? The source leaves us standing right at this precipice. Will the United States choose to continue acting primarily as an empire, prioritizing global control, massive military funding, and outward power at literally all costs? Or will it pivot? Will it return its focus inward to choose the path of a democracy, prioritizing domestic health, education, and the immediate everyday needs of its own citizens? It is a precarious balancing act of profound consequence, not just for the nation, but honestly, for the entire world. I'm going to leave you to ponder that completely open question. Keep exploring the material, keep questioning these massive systemic structures, and we'll see you in the next explainer.